The alarms tore through the ship at 3 in the morning, and my door burst open before I even opened my eyes. Guards, 6 of them, tall and armored, filling my small quarters like a wall of metal and fury. Their leader grabbed my shoulder and hauled me up from my bunk, shouting a question I could not understand at first, because my brain was still catching up to the noise. "Where is she? Where is the princess?" I blinked hard, trying to clear the sleep from my eyes, and that was when I felt the blanket shift beside me. A small hand grabbed the edge of my sleeve, and a soft voice whispered from underneath the covers. "Please don't let them take me back yet." My heart nearly stopped. I looked down and saw 2 large, dark eyes peeking out from the blanket. It was her, Ithkara, the missing heir to the Sarian throne. The girl every guard on this ship had been searching for since midnight. And she had been here, in my room, the entire time. I want to explain how this happened, because it is not what it looks like. 3 weeks earlier, our diplomatic ship had docked with the Sarian royal fleet for trade talks between our 2 peoples. The Syrians were tall, calm, and unreadable, trained from birth to hide every emotion behind a mask of perfect control. Their leaders believed that fear was a weakness enemies could use, so their children were taught to bury it deep, no matter how young they were. I was just an engineer assigned to fix a broken coolant line in one of the cargo bays. I never expected to meet royalty there, covered in grease, holding a wrench. But that day, the ship ran a surprise combat drill. Alarms blared, lights flashed red, and the deck shook from simulated impacts. I turned around and saw a young girl pressed against the wall, shaking, her hands over her ears. She wore a small circlet on her head, the kind only someone of very high rank would wear. I did not know who she was. I only saw a frightened child. I sat down on a crate near her, not too close, and said the drill was loud and annoying, and that it scared me too the first time I heard it. She looked at me with wide eyes, surprised that anyone would admit to being scared out loud. Slowly, her shaking stopped. We sat there until the alarm ended, and she thanked me before hurrying away. I did not think much of it after that, until she came back. She started visiting the cargo bay during her free hours, always alone, always careful not to be seen. She told me her name only after the 3rd visit, and when I realized who she truly was, I almost dropped my tools in shock, but she asked me not to treat her differently, and so I did not. We talked about small things, her strange dislike of the ship's food, my clumsy attempts to learn a few words of her language, a garden back on her home planet that she said nobody visited anymore because it held no political importance, only memories of her father, who had passed away when she was very young. She was not looking for a rescue or an escape from her life. She just wanted a place where she did not have to be perfect every single second. The night everything changed began with a grand banquet held aboard the flagship. I was not invited, since I was only a simple engineer, but I heard about it from the crew chatter. The Queen was going to announce her daughter's engagement to the son of a powerful warlord from a rival system, a match meant to end years of conflict between their peoples. Ithkara was 16. She had never even met the young man she was expected to marry. I did not know any of this until she showed up outside my quarters that night, dressed in her formal royal clothing, her circlet slightly crooked, her breathing fast and uneven. She asked if she could come inside, just for a little while, just until she could breathe normally again. I let her in. I should have reported it immediately. I know that now. But looking at her in that moment, trembling, trying so hard to hold back tears, because crying was something princesses were never supposed to do in public, I could not bring myself to send her back into that room full of cameras and cold expectations. She told me about the engagement through broken sentences, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, angry at herself for not being strong enough to hide her feelings. I told her there was nothing wrong with being upset about something so big happening to her without her choice in the matter. I told her that even queens and princes have moments where they simply need to sit down and admit that something hurts. She stayed. We did not plan a rebellion. We did not plot to run away from the ship. We just talked. I made her a warm drink from one of my ration packets, something sweet that she said tasted strange but good. We played a simple card game with a deck I had brought from home, and for a little while, the alarms of her real life went quiet. She fell asleep on the small couch in my room, somewhere past midnight, still talking softly about her garden, about wanting to plant something there again someday. I covered her with a blanket and let her sleep. I did not send word to anyone. I know that was wrong by every rule of protocol, but I told myself I would inform someone at first light, quietly, without turning her into a headline. I did not expect the entire flagship to erupt into a full search before dawn. By the time the guards found us, 11 hours had passed since she vanished from the banquet hall. The Queen herself had been informed, and from what I later learned, she had feared the worst. Kidnapping, an attack from a rival house, perhaps even worse. Now here I was, pulled from my bed, staring at 6 armed guards, while the missing princess clutched my sleeve and begged not to be dragged away like a criminal had captured her. The guards did not wait for explanations. Word spread through the ship in minutes, and soon the door to my quarters opened again, this time much more slowly. The room seemed to grow smaller as the Queen herself stepped inside. She was taller than any guard, dressed simply, compared to her usual ceremonial robes, which somehow made her presence even more powerful. Her eyes swept the room and landed on her daughter, still holding tightly onto the edge of my blanket. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence felt heavier than the alarms had been. Then the Queen said one word, quiet but sharp enough to cut through the tension. She asked her daughter if she was harmed. Ithkara shook her head and finally let go of my sleeve, though she stayed close to me as she stood. She said she was not harmed. She said she had been safe the entire time, safer than she had felt in years, and that nobody had touched her or threatened her in any way. The Queen turned her sharp gaze toward me, and I felt every guard in that room tighten their grip on their weapons. She asked me why her daughter had chosen a stranger's small quarters over the safety of her own guarded chambers. I could have made an excuse. I could have said it was a misunderstanding, that I found her wandering and brought her in out of concern, that I planned to report it immediately. It would have been easier, safer for me. Instead, I told the truth. I explained that Ithkara came to me on her own, not because she wanted to run from her responsibilities, but because she needed a few hours where nobody expected her to be perfectly calm and composed. I told the Queen about the drill weeks earlier, about the fear her daughter had been forced to hide, about how even the strongest people sometimes need somewhere safe to simply feel scared out loud without judgment. I told her I never once asked her daughter to be brave for me. I only asked her to be herself. The Queen said nothing for a long moment. Her expression, trained through decades of diplomacy, gave nothing away. I braced myself for punishment, for accusations, for the end of my small career on this mission. Instead, she turned back to her daughter and asked, in a voice much softer than before, why she never told her mother how she truly felt about the engagement. Ithkara's voice shook as she answered. She said she had tried many times, but every time she started to speak, she remembered that a queen's daughter was not supposed to have doubts, especially not doubts that could be seen as weakness in front of enemies watching for any crack in their strength. The Queen closed her eyes briefly, and for the first time since she entered the room, I saw something crack in her own carefully built composure. Grief, regret, perhaps even guilt for the pressure she had placed on her only child, without realizing how heavy it truly was. She dismissed the guards from the room with a simple wave of her hand. They left without a word, leaving only the 3 of us standing there in the quiet aftermath of the search that had shaken the entire ship. The Queen sat down slowly on the edge of my small couch, the same one her daughter had slept on hours earlier, and asked Ithkara to sit beside her. For the first time in what her daughter later told me was years, they simply talked, without guards, without cameras, without the weight of an entire empire watching every word. I stood quietly by the door, unsure if I should leave or stay, until the Queen looked up at me and told me to remain. She said her daughter trusted me enough to feel safe, and trust like that, especially from a girl raised to trust almost no one completely, was not something to be dismissed or punished. By morning, the engagement announcement was postponed. Not cancelled entirely, since politics between great powers rarely bend that quickly, but delayed until further consideration could be given to the well-being of the young heir at the center of it all. The Queen never thanked me directly. I learned quickly that Sarians rarely express gratitude in words. Instead, she assigned me as a permanent liaison to her daughter's household, a position of trust I later learned was rarely given to outsiders, especially not to a simple engineer who had broken half the rules on the ship in one single night. Ithkara still visits sometimes, when the palace grows too loud and the expectations grow too heavy for her to carry alone. We do not play cards for anything important anymore. We play them simply because losing out loud, laughing about it, admitting when something is hard, turned out to be a kind of freedom that nobody had ever offered an empire's daughter before that night. The alarms went off and found her safe, right where she needed to be.